In September of 1965, Chevrolet quietly rated its brand new big block engine at 450 horsepower, a genuinely enormous number for the era. 2 months later, with no mechanical changes to the engine whatsoever, that same engine suddenly wore a considerably more modest 425 horsepower rating instead. Nothing about the engine had changed. What had changed was that Ford and Chrysler had both just settled, informally, on the exact same 425 horsepower ceiling for their own biggest engines that year, and Chevrolet's own corporate bosses apparently decided it wasn't worth sticking out from the crowd. It's one of the strangest, least discussed stories in the entire history of Chevrolet's most feared engine, a 427 cubic inch big block that would go on to terrify entire generations of street racers, power some of the most legendary muscle cars in American history, and, in at least one of its most extreme forms, lie so thoroughly about its own horsepower rating that Chevrolet's own paperwork became a kind of legend all on its own. This isn't a countdown of 10 cars from a single year. This is the story of one engine family and every legendary car it helped create. This is the story of Chevrolet's Mark IV 427, the engine that started life quietly in a family sedan nobody associated with speed and grew into one of the single most feared power plants any manufacturer in America ever built. From full-size Impalas that looked like Grandpa's grocery car and ran like a scolded cat, to a Corvette engine so extreme Chevrolet deliberately underrated it to keep casual buyers away, to a dealer-ordered loophole that put the same engine into a compact Nova, this is the story of how one big block engine became legendary in almost every body style Chevrolet ever bolted it into. Chevrolet's Mark IV big block architecture debuted for 1965 as the 396 cubic inch V8, first appearing in the tiny, secretive Z16 Chevelle and the Corvette. But it was the 1966 model year that turned this engine family into something genuinely feared, when Chevrolet bored the block out to a full 427 cubic inches, creating an engine platform that would go on to power everything from full-size family sedans to purpose-built drag cars over the following 4 years. This exact window, 1966 through 1969, also happened to fall right in the middle of General Motors' own internal corporate restrictions on big block engines in smaller cars, restrictions that had already forced Pontiac to find a loophole for the original GTO, and would soon force a small group of determined Chevrolet dealers to find their own creative way around the rules entirely. The 427 story is inseparable from that exact tension, a genuinely feared engine, constantly running up against a corporate rulebook that kept trying, and largely failing, to keep it contained. The 427's most surprising home wasn't the Corvette at all. It was Chevrolet's full-size lineup, the Biscayne, Bel Air, Impala, and Caprice, ordinary family sedans that for a few remarkable years could be special ordered with an engine most buyers never imagined sitting under that hood. Starting in 1966, Chevrolet offered the L36, a milder, hydraulic-cammed 427 rated at 390 horsepower, alongside the considerably more serious L72, a solid lifter 427 originally rated at that startling 450 horsepower before its quiet, unexplained downgrade to 425. Just 1,856 full-size Chevrolets left the factory with the L72 in 1966 alone, and for a brief handful of years, an ordinary-looking Impala or Biscayne could genuinely embarrass far flashier, far more obviously aggressive muscle cars at a stoplight, one of the original sleeper stories that would define an entire subculture of street racing. That strange, sudden horsepower downgrade from 450 to 425 wasn't a coincidence, and it wasn't a mechanical correction. It was corporate diplomacy. In November of 1965, right around the same time Chevrolet quietly revised the L72's rating downward, Ford and Chrysler both happened to settle on the exact same 425 horsepower ceiling for their own flagship big blocks that year. Reading between the lines, most historians believe it reflected an informal, unwritten understanding among Detroit's biggest manufacturers. A shared recognition that advertising numbers much higher than 425 horsepower risk drawing exactly the kind of attention from insurance regulators and safety advocates that none of them wanted yet. It's a quiet, almost invisible moment in the 427's history, but it tells you everything about how carefully Detroit was already managing its own horsepower war years before public pressure forced the issue into the open.
While full-size sedans were quietly terrifying unsuspecting street racers, the 427 found its most natural home in the Corvette, debuting there for the 1966 model year as the largest, most powerful engine Chevrolet had ever offered in its flagship sports car. Buyers could choose between the milder L36 and the same solid-lifter L72 found in the full-size cars, both wrapped in a body considerably lighter than any Impala or Biscayne could ever match. For 1967, Chevrolet expanded the lineup further, adding the L68, a triple carburetor version, and the L71, another triple carburetor variant with an even more aggressive camshaft, officially rated at 435 horsepower. Combined with the Corvette's inherent weight advantage, a well-driven 427 Corvette from this era could comfortably run the quarter mile in the low to mid 13-second range, straight from the factory, genuinely supercar-level performance for the mid-1960s. If the standard 427 lineup was already feared, the L88 was something else entirely. An engine Chevrolet built almost exclusively for racing, then deliberately, knowingly misrepresented on paper to keep it out of the wrong hands. Available only in the Corvette between 1967 and 1969, the L88 combined 12.5-to-1 compression, aluminum cylinder heads, an aggressive solid lifter camshaft, and a single massive Holley carburetor, all wrapped around requirements that buyers also order posi traction, transistorized ignition, and heavy-duty suspension, while deleting the radio and heater entirely. Chevrolet officially rated the L88 at just 430 horsepower, a number lower than the considerably milder L71's own 435 horsepower rating, an obviously deliberate piece of misdirection meant to discourage casual buyers from ever finding it. Real-world dyno testing, both at the time and in modern restorations, has consistently placed the L88's actual output somewhere between 540 and 580 horsepower. Just a combined total of a few hundred L88 Corvettes were built across its entire 3-year run, a genuinely tiny number for any American production car, making it, dollar for dollar, one of the rarest, most feared, and most quietly dishonest engines Chevrolet ever officially sold to the public. It's worth pausing on exactly why Chevrolet would deliberately rate its most powerful production engine lower than a considerably milder one sitting right next to it on the same order sheet. The L88 was never really designed for ordinary street driving at all. Its extremely high compression ratio demanded racing-grade fuel that most ordinary gas stations simply didn't carry, and its aggressive solid lifter camshaft made for a genuinely difficult, unpleasant idle in stop-and-go traffic. Chevrolet's engineers knew exactly what they'd built, a genuine race car engine wrapped in a Corvette body purely because SCCA and endurance racing rules required a minimum number of street-legal examples to exist before the car could compete. Underrating the horsepower on paper was a deliberate filter designed to steer away anyone who hadn't already done their homework and to keep the engine firmly in the hands of buyers who understood exactly what they were getting into. By 1969, a small group of performance-obsessed Chevrolet dealers had discovered exactly how to get the 427 into cars Chevrolet's own corporate rulebook was never supposed to allow it into. Using Chevrolet's obscure central office production order system, originally intended for fleet and commercial vehicle orders, dealers like Fred Gibb and Don Yenko found they could special order genuinely small numbers of Camaros, Chevelles, and even the compact Nova, fitted directly from the factory with the same 427 big block previously reserved for full-size cars and the Corvette. The COPO Camaro in both its iron block L72 form and its exotic all-aluminum ZL1 form remains the most famous product of this loophole. But COPO Chevelles and COPO Novas, built in genuinely tiny numbers, are today considered among the rarest, most valuable muscle cars Chevrolet ever produced in any form. The absolute pinnacle of the 427's entire story arrived with the ZL1, an all-aluminum version of the engine, originally developed for Can-Am sports car racing, weighing barely 500 pounds despite its enormous displacement. Ordered through the same COPO system that had already produced the iron block L72 Camaros, the ZL1 was officially rated at 430 horsepower, a number nearly everyone in the industry at the time understood to be deliberately conservative, with independent testing placing the real output well above 500 horsepower. Just 69 ZL1 Camaros were ever built, each one-hand assembled at enormous expense, at a sticker price so high that Fred Gibbs dealerships struggled to sell more than a handful before the remaining cars were quietly redistributed to other performance dealers around the country. It stands today as arguably the single rarest, most extreme expression of the entire 427 family, the exact same basic engine architecture that had started life quietly in a family sedan, now pushed to its absolute, almost unaffordable limit. Even as a 427 found fame in Corvettes and Camaros, its original home in Chevrolet's full-size lineup never fully disappeared, continuing through 1969 in the Impala SS 427 and its Caprice, Bel Air, and Biscayne siblings. These cars occupied a genuinely unusual niche in Chevrolet's own lineup, full-size, comfortable, dignified-looking sedans carrying Corvette-grade displacement underneath completely ordinary sheet metal. Period drag racers regularly campaigned stock-bodied full-size 427 Chevrolets in NHRA Superstock ranks, and NASCAR calendars of the era featured big block Impalas running competitively against far more overtly aggressive-looking rivals. Today, a genuine documented L72 Impala or Biscayne occupies a respected, if often overlooked, corner of the collector market. Proof that the 427's original mission, quietly terrifying unsuspecting street racers from inside an unassuming family car, never really went away. Put all of these applications together, and it's easy to understand exactly why the Chevrolet 427 built the reputation it did across the late 1960s. You genuinely never knew what you were looking at. A 427 could be sitting under the hood of a stripped-down Corvette built purely for racing, a full-size Impala that looked like somebody's grandfather's car, a Camaro ordered through a loophole most Chevrolet dealers didn't even know existed, or a compact Nova that had absolutely no business running the numbers it could actually run. That unpredictability, combined with genuinely enormous horsepower across nearly every version of the engine, made the 427 badge, wherever it appeared, something that commanded real respect at any stoplight or drag strip in America throughout this entire era. Like almost every great engine from this era, the 427's reign didn't last. Rising insurance costs, tightening emissions regulations, and General Motors' own increasingly cautious corporate posture toward performance all closed in by the start of the 1970s. Chevrolet retired the 427 from the Corvette after 1969, replacing it the following year with the new 454 cubic inch big block, including the legendary LS6, itself finally matching and briefly exceeding the L72's original 450 horsepower rating from 4 years earlier. The COPO loophole that had spread the 427 into Camaros, Chevelles, and Novas closed almost as quickly as it had opened, as GM tightened its own internal ordering rules, and insurance premiums made these already rare special orders even harder to justify. By the early 1970s, the 427 badge had essentially disappeared from Chevrolet's regular production lineup entirely, its 4-year reign of Chevrolet's most feared engine quietly giving way to the next generation of big blocks that would carry the fight forward. Look at any list of the most valuable, most sought-after Chevrolets from the entire muscle car era, and the 427 badge shows up again and again, wearing an astonishing variety of different bodies. The 1967 Corvette L88, the rarest and most extreme version of the standard engine, regularly commands prices well into seven figures at major collector auctions today. The 1969 ZL1 Camaro, with only 69 ever built, ranks among the single most valuable muscle cars any collector can hope to own, regardless of manufacturer. Even the comparatively humble full-size L72 Impalas and Biscaynes, genuine sleepers that most casual observers walked right past in 1966, have become respected, actively sought-after pieces of Chevrolet history in their own right. Very few engines in American automotive history can claim to have made this many genuinely different cars legendary across this many genuinely different price points and body styles. So what does this engine's entire story actually prove? That a single, well-engineered big block could become genuinely feared, not because of one iconic car, but because it kept showing up again and again in places nobody expected to find it. A family sedan, a compact economy car, a hand-built racing special disguised as a showroom Camaro. That Chevrolet, like nearly every manufacturer of this era, understood exactly how to use a horsepower number as a weapon, whether that meant quietly lowering a rating to avoid drawing attention or deliberately underselling an engine's true capability to keep it out of the wrong hands. The Chevrolet 427 didn't earn its fearsome reputation from a single legendary model year or a single iconic body style. It earned it by proving, over and over, across nearly every corner of Chevrolet's own lineup, that you genuinely never knew what was hiding under the next hood you pulled up next to at a stoplight. And for an entire generation of street racers, that uncertainty was exactly what made it so respected.
Which car powered by Chevrolet's 427 would you bring back if you could only choose one? The terrifying L88 Corvette, the ultra-rare ZL1 Camaro, or a sleeper full-size Impala hiding an L72 nobody would ever expect? Did your father, your uncle, or a neighbor on your street ever own a car with a genuine 427 under the hood? Write the story in the comments below.